Kitty Genovese has become a national symbol for a person who is crying out in desperate need, desperate pleas for help, only for those who saw and witnessed what she went through to ignore her cries and pleas for help. It was March the 13th, 1964, about 2 o'clock in the morning. Winston Moseley decided that he needed to just go out and kill someone. He left his wife and his children and he went out looking for someone. Kitty Genovese was coming home from work and she was crossing the street in Queens, New York. Winston came up behind her and stabbed her twice, puncturing her lung. She fell on the sidewalk and started screaming and pleading for help. He got in his car and he left. She still laid there. Lights were coming on all around her. People were looking out their windows. They saw her laying there. No one said anything. No one came to her aid. No one called the police. So 10 minutes later, he came back and he finished the job that he came to start with. He stabbed her multiple times. She had stab wounds in her hands where she was trying to defend herself. And this created an outroar, just an outrage in the community. And the New York Times published an article a few weeks later indicating that 38 people saw and heard and witnessed this brutal murder and yet did nothing to help. They did an investigation and went and they interviewed all of the neighbors, and they didn't find 38 people, but they did find at least 12 who acknowledged that they had seen and heard and witnessed this, and they didn't do anything about it. So this really just created something in our whole nation that shook us to our core, and they began doing research and trying to look into this, and actually it has been called a psychological phenomenon called the bystander effect, the Genovese syndrome, the diffusion of responsibility. I see it, I hear it, I see the pain, I see the hurt, but I'm not going to get involved. I don't want to do anything about it because I'm afraid. And so now we come today to a study in the last part of our study on community, on service, as we look in what it means to reach out and meet the needs in our community. And what we see is that there are people all over this community who are also crying out for help. It may even be a silent cry, but nevertheless, they're dying inside and they need help. And we continue to meet and have our holy huddles, and we can easily let this be our expression of religion rather than also seeing the needs of those in our community who are hurting so desperately. So this morning we're going to talk about what it means to build a missional community. Now, I think it can be helpful to get a good definition. What is a missional community? And this is my definition. A missional community is a fellowship of followers of Christ who are sent out by God to share the love of Christ in word and deed with those outside the church with the goal of building, multiplying disciples of Christ. Now, although we sometimes would frequently say the church has a mission, I think it would be more correct to say that the mission has a church. The mission is the greater entity, the mission of God, of what He is doing in the world, because God has a mission. God is on mission. He is about the business of drawing people all over the world into a dynamic, loving relationship with Christ. That's what He's up to. That's what He's doing. And so the church has an opportunity as the primary agent of God to be on mission with Him in piercing the darkness and meeting desperate needs in our community. And so we see the need for that. A missional community is patterned after what God has done in Jesus Christ. What did God do in Jesus? He sent Him. He sent Him from heaven into the world to shed light and to give His life as a sacrifice for many. Similarly, mission for us means that we are to be sent into the world. We do not expect people to come to us. We go to them. And we're all on mission every day, at work, at school, at the bank, in the restaurant, in the coffee houses, even at home. If we have people in our home who do not know Christ, we are sent to share the love of Christ in both word and in deed. And so this morning we're going to see Jesus going into a synagogue, a gathering, much like this gathering here today, and confronting the people in this synagogue with their own bystander effect, their own Genovese syndrome, their own diffusion of responsibility, their own unwillingness to be involved. Because what does he do? He comes in and he sees a man who is in distress, and he deals with the distress and the desperate need that this man has, even to the possible exclusion of his own involvement there, because the Pharisees are watching him to see if he's going to break any of the rules of the Sabbath. So we go to Mark chapter 3, verse 1. He entered again into the synagogue, and a man was there whose hand was withered. They were watching him to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man with the withered hand, "Get up and come forward." So what we see in this story, in this account of what happened in this synagogue, we will see some steps into how we can build a missional community here at New Life. First of all, everyone in this synagogue is seeing something. Everyone's seeing something. Everyone is looking. Everyone is watching. They're just watching and seeing different things. And so here we see the first step to building a missional community, and that is that missional community is initiated with the right visualization. And because of that, we must learn to see the way Jesus sees. We all see life through the lens of our own values, our own beliefs, our own convictions. We interpret life through the way we see it. As the old mountain preacher Vance Havner said in one of his quotes, "You can't be optimistic if you have a misty optic." You've got to be able to see clearly in order to rightly discern what's going on around you. And in this setting of the synagogue, the Pharisees were seeing through the lens of self-righteousness, while Jesus was seeing through the lens of loving relationship. Now, out of all the spiritual activities that a devout Jew might engage in, activities like prayer and giving of alms and fasting and observing holy days, the most common and most obvious was the act of Sabbath observance. And it was so important, there was no work allowed on the Sabbath, that the Pharisees had developed an extra biblical set of rules and regulations of what you can do and what you can't do on the Sabbath to make sure that no work is done. And that also included this issue that Jesus brought in front of them, the issue of healing. And so on the Sabbath, their rules and regulations said that you cannot do anything in a healing work except to do the bare minimum necessary to save the life of someone who's dying. So, if a wall falls on someone, then they were allowed to clear the rubble away from the body to see if the person was alive or if the person was dead. If the person was alive, then they could do just enough to keep them alive until the next day, so that they could then give them the medical attention that they needed to help them heal. If they were dead, they had to leave the body in the rubble until the next day, when they could then move it and prepare it for burial. If a person broke their arm or their leg, then they were not able to have it set until the next day, if it happened on the Sabbath. If a person cut their finger, they could put a bandage on it, but they couldn't put any ointment on it because that would advance the healing process. And so that's the kind of rule and regulation that they had. If a person sprained their ankle, they were not allowed to pour cold water on it to keep the swelling from swelling up too much, they had to wait until the next day to do that. Those are the kinds of rules and regulations that they were facing, and then Jesus brings this man with the withered hand right up in front of them. All of a sudden now he becomes the object lesson. Now it's time for show and tell. And the Jewish leaders were seeing through the lens of legalism that led them to believe that if they keep the rules and regulations, they could achieve their own righteousness, which is self-righteousness. But Jesus saw through a different set of lenses. He saw that life is about loving God and loving people under the covering of the grace of God. And so when we come to Christ and His sacrifice for what He's done for us on the cross, that's where we get our righteousness. As we transfer our trust and believe in Him and follow Him as His disciples, then we're free to love God and love people. And we can then be free to let the cross be our righteousness instead of keeping our own little set of rules and regulations. And so we come to our little holy huddles, and God is calling us to transform our holy huddles into missional communities. And in order to do that, we have to get a different set of glasses. We have to get a different set of lenses so that we can see the way Jesus sees. So are you more concerned about religion or relationship? Are you more concerned about looking good or doing good? Are you more concerned about being right or being ready to help those who are in need? You think about that little term, huddle. If you were paying good money to go to an NFL football game, and during the first quarter that most of the time the team spent in a huddle, then you'd probably leave after the first quarter. The huddle is for the purpose of getting direction and guidance and understanding and developing the play, but then the goal is to execute the play on the field. And so think about that in terms of the church. The huddles are important. We get energized, we get built up, we get encouraged, and we get charged up. But then we're to go from the huddle out into the world and implement and serve and meet the needs that we see out there as part of the execution of the game plan. Missional community is initiated with the right visualization, so we must learn to see the way Jesus sees. So do you see the needs of those around you? Verse 4. And he said to them, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save a life or to kill? Now that was a rhetorical question in which everyone knew, even the Pharisees, that the obvious answer is yes. Yes. It's always right to do good rather than to do harm. It's always right to save a life rather than to destroy or kill someone on the Sabbath. The command of God prevents us, it never prevents us from doing good to others by meeting their crying needs. That's what He's calling us to do. And Jesus, yet He was also confronting the Pharisees with something that they both knew were in their hearts, and that is, this was not just a hypothetical question. Is it good to save a life or to kill a life? Because, as we're going to see in just a few verses, the Pharisees were plotting as to how they might kill Jesus. And He's confronting them with what's really going on in their hearts. And so the next step in building a missional community is not only that it is initiated with the right visualization, but next we see missional community is established with the right revelation. We must learn to believe the way Jesus believes. Jesus believes something very deeply. He believed that it is better to help people and to do good to people than to keep extra biblical rules. He believed that we must be all about saving lives and not destroying lives. And if we read Matthew's account of this same situation, this same story in the book of Matthew, Jesus said something in addition to what we see in Mark. In Matthew 12:11, Jesus said, and this was His lesson for the day, if any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? how much more valuable is a human being than a sheep? You see, Jesus never locked eyes with anyone who he did not see as the zenith of God's creation. Every person was important. And he looked at this man and he saw his disability and he was moved with compassion. There are historical accounts of these stories of the Gospels that didn't make it into the Gospels, but there were Jewish historians that also reported these stories. And there's one report of this particular story in which they go on to say that this man with the withered hand was not born that way. He was actually a stonemason, and he was injured on the job, and he was not able to perform his work every day because of the one bad hand. You can't be a stonemason if you have a bad hand. And so we see that Jesus was moved with compassion. He wanted to help him. He wanted to do something for him. And we see this happening all throughout the ministry of Jesus. If you just look at what Jesus did, what did he do? He went around healing people, preaching the kingdom of God, healing, casting out demons. That's pretty much all he did. And he would heal and heal and heal and heal. And it would come to the end of the day and he would be exhausted and people kept coming to him. And yet the scripture says what? He was moved with compassion because he saw them as sheep without a shepherd. That's our Jesus. And that's the kind of heart that he wants to put into us. So who have you bumped into lately? Think for a minute about the multitude of people, strangers or acquaintances, whose paths crossed yours this past week. The server behind the counter at your favorite coffee shop. The mechanic who worked on your car. The lab partner you got stuck with in biology class. The receptionist in your office building. The quirky characters who are part of your extended family. As I've said earlier, every family seems to have an Uncle Fester in the attic. But these are people that God has brought into our lives, the parents with whom you make small talk on the soccer sidelines, the soccer field. So I have an assignment for you. I want to challenge you to go home and get an index card and just take it with you this week and just write down the names of all of the people you see this week and write down what their need is. Just look for people with desperate needs. Look for people in anguish. And just write down their name, write down the need, and write down what kind of opportunity that might be for you to step in and help them with whatever need they have. So we have opportunities to serve in a powerful way. And so as you look at this, imagine all of the things that we could do. I realize that we're busy, we're working hard. You know, and some of you go to work every day and you come home, you drag in every night, and it seems that all you can is just work every day, take care of your immediate business, spend some time with your family, do some projects on the weekend, go to church on Sunday and start the whole thing over on Monday again. You say, I don't have time to do what you're talking about. I don't have time to go out and serve in the community. Well, guess what? You can look, you can have eyes to see needs right where you are, everywhere you go. We don't have to organize everything. Just find a need and meet it. And then you're a missionary. You're taking the mission to the field, wherever you go, whatever needs you meet, and sharing the love of Christ with people in both word and deed. But there are services, there are organizations, there are nonprofits in our community that are designed to help people in need. And we can be a part of that. That's why we have so much of an emphasis in our partnership with ABCCM and other ministries, our local ministries, Crisis Pregnancy Center. There's another ministry that I want you to know about. It's called the Christian Women's Job Corps. Now, this is an incredible ministry because they don't just give a hand out, they give women a hand up. You see, they don't just give them a fish to feed them for a day, they teach them how to fish and feed them for a lifetime. And what they need is mentors. They need mentors to come alongside of women who really want to do better for themselves, to help mentor them into a place where they can find gainful employment. Let's watch this.
These women are frightened. These women have been abused. These women have serious trust issues. They have to have that trust built. Everybody needs somebody. You have to take that step. You have to take that chance. because that's the only way you're going to grow. We're out there scared. With the Christian Women's Job Corps mentor, my life is a lot more fulfilling. I'm not as isolated, which is the primary factor that put me into such a major depression. It has completely changed my life. I have the hope of looking forward to continuing living my life.
Christian Women's Job Corps is not a financial aid program. It is not a job providing program, but it is a one-on-one mentoring program. We need you to be a mentor in Christian Women's Job Corps because you have a certain quality that you can meet a special woman's need. You can be an encourager, you can be a mentor, you can be a friend, and you can share God's love in a non-judgmental and meaningful way.
I appreciate Farron Cole producing that video so that we could see what's happening there. Cindy Patton will be out at the connection counter after the service, and she'd like to talk with you if you'd be interested. Maybe you're asking the question, how do I get connected? Who can I help? I don't know where to go. And this is a great way to become a mentor. It's not hard. It's just being willing to be a friend and help a lady, and you'll get all the training and help that you need, and they can put you together with someone. So please stop by the connection counter on your way out today and speak to Cindy Patton, and she'll be waiting for you there. So after we move on here, verse 4, it says, "But they kept silent after looking around at them with anger, grieved in their hardness of heart. He said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately began conspiring with the Herodians against him as to how they might destroy him." This term for looking around, it's that term that means hard, penetrating stare. And I can just see Jesus just one watching. As they were watching him, now it's his turn to watch. And this man standing there beside him, and he's just looking each one of them in the eye with this anger, with this righteous indignation, and yet with this deep sorrow that they've missed it so far that they can't even see that it's about meeting needs. It's about loving people. It's about helping people. And so here we see a final step in building a missional community. And that is that missional community is experienced with the right implementation. Missional community is experienced with the right implementation. Lastly, we must learn to serve the way Jesus serves. You can just imagine this man standing here, and all of a sudden his hand is restored to total health and dexterity. And he's just moving his fingers and moving his hand around, and it's perfect. And he realizes, I can go to work tomorrow. He's helped me. He's done something special for me. And Jesus made it very clear here that he was instituting a whole new system. Jesus said in John 13:34, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." And Jesus also said, what greater love is there that a man would lay down his life for his friends? You see, we're not only called to love God and love people, but we are called to love God by loving people. That's the way we show our love for God. So let me ask you a searching question. Who are you involved? Who are you involved in helping in this community who is not a part of your family or your immediate people that you're with all the time? Who are you serving? Who are you helping? Is there a way that you could get involved just by being aware of the needs of the people around you? What we want to do is we want to see our life groups transformed into missional communities. Our life groups and our age-graded ministries all operate on a very simple structure. We reach up, we reach in, and we reach out. That's what we do. We reach up to God in prayer and worship. We reach in fellowship and nurture in the Word and encouragement of each other. And then we reach out with the love of Christ in both word and deed into our community. Simple. But so many times the extent of our activity seems to be reaching up and reaching in, and we don't have time to quite get out. So let me just challenge you to do something. If you don't have time to do an extra ministry project together, then let one of your life group meetings each month be a ministry project. You'll still be together. You'll just be serving in the community instead of having a Bible study. We get lots of Bible study. There are lots of ways that we can do that. We can become self-feeders. But when we're together, one of the things that God's calling us to do is serve and meet needs in our community. And so that's why on July the 15th, we're not going to have church that day. We're going to meet here at 9 o'clock. We're going to sing, we're going to pray, and we're going to go out and we're going to serve our community. We'll have all kinds of opportunities and activities that we can serve together, our community, and make a statement to our community. And that is, it's not all about us coming in here, but it's about us being out there to meet their needs. So we want to get ideas from you as to how we can better serve our community. We want to get ideas from you of needs that you know about in our community that we can serve. Send us emails, call us, let us know what we can do to serve our community, because this is about all of us serving together as we plan to go out. Serving others can be part of our own healing as we get our minds off of ourselves and get our minds onto the needs of those around us. I read an incredible Facebook post a couple of weeks ago by one of our former worship leaders, Ricky Gessler. Ricky is now in New York, and I want to read what he wrote in his Facebook post. Lowe's parking lot, Orangeburg. A 3-year-old boy stands on a high tailgate while his muscle-bound daddy loads bags of concrete. The boy tries to climb off, misjudges the distance, and hits the pavement face first. The first cry takes all of his breath away and opens his mouth to twice its normal size. Immediately, Daddy scoops him up and puts him right back on that deadly tailgate. And he comforts him there, holding him and stroking his protruding red ear. The second breath brings a louder cry. Daddy checks the wrist, not broken. A few kind words. Then he offers for the boy to help with a bag of mulch. And suddenly, all the pain is gone. With one hand, the boy wipes his tears, and with the other, he grips a corner of the mulch bag, which of course moves him more than he moves it. I want to be a dad. There's something godly about it. Isn't that beautiful? You see, this little boy experienced what we all need to experience. He discovered that his little hurts, his little problems, his little scrape was not nearly as important now that he was needed, and was not nearly as important now that he had a job to do and someone needed his help. And I think there is a little boy locked up in the heart of every person in this room. We want to be needed. We want to be able to help. We want to make this world a better place. And when we get involved in that, we forget about all of our little problems, because then we can be a part of making our community a better community and being a part of loving others. And we're grateful for that privilege to be able to be a part of that. One of the best things a parent can do in raising their children is to teach them to serve the Lord. Think about the amount of hours that our children spend on video games, trying to just find something to have fun. And yet what we see is the kids who are the healthiest are the kids whose parents take them out into the community and they serve alongside of their parents in making a difference. One of the ladies in our church took her son with her for 5 years every week to ABCCM, and he served next to her in the kitchen and then in the clothes ministry, and they kept doing that until he really got the hang of it, and then he started going without her and doing it himself. He got a vision for serving, for doing something to help someone in the community. And it changed his life. And that was a big part of his education and his training. Teenagers, listen to me for just a minute. Your purpose in life is not to see how much fun you can have and how many of your classmates you can get to be your friends. God has created you for a purpose, and it is to make a difference in this world. Your purpose in life is not to get an education just so that you can get a good job and go out and buy all the things that you want for yourself. Your purpose in life is to get an education and get training and skills so that you can go out and actually help people and make a difference in this world and be a contribution to society instead of a drain on society, and make a difference in the world and help someone. And so let's get out of ourselves and ask ourselves how we can do the most good for our community. In Acts 13:36, it says, "For David, after he had served the purpose of God in his own generation, fell asleep and was laid among his fathers and underwent decay." Now, all of us are going to do the same thing. We're going to fall asleep at the end of our lives. And we're going to be buried with our fathers, and we're going to undergo decay. But the big question that's left is, will we serve God's purpose in our generation? Is that what they will be able to say about you at your funeral? Is that what they will be able to put as an epitaph on your headstone? She served God's purpose in their generation. God has a mission, and He wants us to be on it with Him. And He wants us to have a different set of eyes, a different set of beliefs, and He wants us to have a different set of activity and convictions as we go out to meet needs beyond us. Father, we thank You for this time together. We praise You and bless You that we have the privilege to be a part of such a time as this, in this generation where people are desperately crying. Yes, just like Kitty Genovese, they're crying out for help, even though it may be a silent cry. And that's why we need discernment. So give us discernment to hear the silent cries around us, to see the pain in the faces of those that we're in contact with every day, to be ready to come to their aid. We bless You and thank You for that privilege. In Your name we pray. Amen.